Okay. The other night we saw the long-awaited sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. What was the first one called?
Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Across the Spider-Verse.
And this one's Across the Spider-Verse, and we saw it. So Connor, what's the plot of Across the Spider-Verse?
Miles Morales has been the Spider-Man for about a year and a half when he is visited by Gwen Stacy, or Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, or Spider-Woman. They never really figured out a name for her, but she comes and she's like, yo, I am a multiverse Spider-Man warrior now because we're trying to stop cosmic multiverse anomalies, but you can't help because you can't, okay, so don't. But then he follows her to Spider-Man India's dimension, and he learns about canon events that happen to all Spider-Men that, if disrupted through the flow of multiverse travel, can potentially unravel the multiverse. So he meets the boss of the Spider-Men, who is Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider-Man 2099. And Miguel tries to stop Spider-Man from fucking up the multiverse while a new villain, Spot, starts to gain multiversal powers, and Spider-Man is in a real pickle. And then it ends for part 2. So Aiden, what did you think of Spider-Verse 2, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
It's a great half movie. Really, there's a lot of setup and not a lot of payoff, and it just kind of ends, which is a little disappointing. But it's all set up for part 2, so I'm sure it'll bother me a lot less once we have part 2. It's brilliantly animated. At this point, they're just showing off with their big mixture of styles. I mean, there's a little bit of style mixing in the first movie, but this movie looks 10 times better than the previous one. They're all over the place with styles of Spider-Man from different universe, like Spider-Punk, who's got a weird pop art thing going on and moves weird, and when they're in the big Spider-Man headquarters that 2099 has built, just all sorts of different animation styles and references to things I don't get, I'm sure. All over the place, really, really fantastic looking. Despite that, it all ties together, despite how it should look really weird because there's so many different styles going on. Yeah, like I said, it's half a movie, so you don't really get a lot of satisfying payoffs, and there isn't really a big villain. 2099 is a bit morally ambiguous, and there's a chase scene with him sort of near the end, but then the movie keeps going for a while to set up other stuff that's going on. And everything is really good. There's good action throughout. Spot maybe isn't the most exciting villain ever, but it seems like they're really setting him up to do some stuff in the next parts. The cliffhanger at the very end is super cool and is probably gonna pay off really well. Yeah, seeing the Spider Dimension, awesome. I like the returning characters, I like the new characters like Spider-Man India and Spider-Punk. You get a lot more depth out of these characters too. First one was a pretty traditional origin story with some neat twists on it. This one definitely has a lot more emotional stuff going on with Miles growing up and Gwen having to go against her father, which takes up the first 15 minutes of this movie, which is really good. Yeah, I don't know how much there is to say about it since we haven't seen the finished product. But I imagine the next part's going to be great. Everything that's set up here is super exciting. And I'm very looking forward to part 2. I would highly recommend part 1, especially in the theater, because this looks incredible. Although you do have to be aware that there's going to be like a 9-month wait for the next one, so.
Right.
Yeah, that's about all I have to say about it now. I'm sure once part 2 actually lands, I'll have a lot more thoughts because everything will actually be paid off. Fantastic half of the movie. Connor, what'd you think of Across the Spider-Verse?
Across the Spider-Verse broke my expectations because I really didn't think that Sony would maintain the quality of the first entry, and they seemingly did. This movie's rating could go up and down, or down, depending how the second part goes, but this first part of the 2-part, I would assume, finale.
Hard not to be optimistic after this one.
Right, it's hard not to be. There is some awkward moments. I'm going to go into spoilers here. Most of the styles blend well. Some do not. Like Spectacular Spider-Man, they switched him to 3D. I don't get why they did that.
Which one's Spectacular?
He's the short Spider-Man who's kind of like looks weird as fuck because he's not 3D animated like the rest of the Spider-Men. There's a few that really stand out because they wanted to tie this to the MCU. So they have Donald Glover's Prowler in there, as well as explicitly referencing Doctor Strange and Spider-Man from Earth 1999, which was the old name for that.
And in the background of one scene, you also see both Garfield and...
Yeah, you see Garfield and Tobey's universes at one point, just stock footage, and you see Spectacular Spider-Man, which they tried to tie in. Spider-Man 66 was a visual gag, but the live action stuff looks a little weird in contrast because everything else is in a 3D animated style.
Seeing Donald Glover sit there to pay off his MCU cameo from like 7 years ago is something.
Right, and then you got Spider-Man 66 is out of place and jarring, but that was kind of the joke.
Yeah,
so they left him 2D, but for some reason they made Spectacular Spider-Man 3D. And this is a total nitpick. I assume they want him to be fairly important. Not super important, but more important than your average background Spidey.
Is Spectacular the Ben Reilly one? Which one's Spectacular?
No, Ben Reilly is Scarlet Spider, who is a character from the comics who's a clone of Peter Parker.
Sure. I don't know which one's Spectacular.
But they kind of did their own thing with it. Spectacular Spider-Man was the Spider-Man that had a few speaking roles with the original voice actor, and he's kind of shorter. It's kind of a cult series. It's one of the Spider-Man animated series that people consider better. No, it's early 2000. It's like 2008 or something like that. And it ran on like Kids WB, and it's kind of a cult thing, and I'd assume they were able to just get the actor back to do some voice lines, so they did. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, there was some jarring ones. I wish they kept him 2D. But this is just nitpicking stuff, because I thought it was cool, all the references and things it ties in. Kind of makes my MCU series, if I ever pick that back, if I ever get the motivation to pick that back up, kind of a headache, because now I have to review a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it makes the multiverse larger. It kind of, again, creates its own rules and ideas for the multiverse, which is kind of probably a headache for Kevin Feige, who already has a bunch of weird rules and shit for the multiverse, that now there's even more weird rules for the multiverse, which I'm sure the MCU will just ignore, but it is, it's interesting. Talking about the actual movie and not just nitpicking the cameos, it's really good. The writing keeps on par with the first movie. I do like the first movie more because it's quick and self-contained. This one is longer and leading into a multi-part. And I don't know how we are in the era where multi-part movies returned. I thought that was like an early 2010s gimmick that came and went. That kind of, it only existed because Harry Potter's like, we're going to split part 7 into 2 parts.
Yeah.
And still
the part where
half
nothing happens. And then
the part that's like a third of the book, and then it's a long-ass battle scene, but still misses a lot of the book.
Yep.
It wasn't the greatest. It was a gimmick.
Yeah, we had
to stretch out Harry Potter and make an extra
that gimmick too. The
then
Hunger
Hobbit,
Games did
Hunger
that.
Games,
Hobbit,
I'm pretty
Hobbit
sure
really did that. Hobbits are
pretty
good
much any
choices.
book movie did that.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff, but now Dune did it because Dune is legitimately a huge story. They wanted to delve into the world building.
Yeah, you can't do Dune
be
in one
faithful.
movie.
So they slashed Dune into 2. And now everyone's doing it again. Vin Diesel's like Fast and Furious 10 is actually a trilogy.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Okay. And now this actually seems like a big story. It gives Empire Strikes Back vibes where it's like, oh damn, the characters are kind of at their lowest point. I think it's fairly obvious where it's gonna go, but I thought this movie was gonna be like. I thought this movie was going to go in slightly different directions, so it actually wasn't as predictable as it seemed. Like, it was somewhat predictable.
Yeah, I mean...
But somewhat not, because I figured the thing was Miles' Earth was the anomaly, which it kind of was, but I figured it was because of the reactor, and I thought that Miguel was going to try to sacrifice Miles' Earth to save the rest of the multiverse or something like that, but... Yeah. It's more Miles is trying to live his own destiny.
Kind of sucks the sport.
Or create his own destiny. It's kind of obvious what's going to happen in the next one, but...
It kind of sucks that the trailer spoiled 2099.
Right.
I don't really know what they're going to do with him going forward, but I think he's going to be one of the major villains in the next one.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll have some kind of redemption, but...
I think he will. I think he's the
I don't
moral...
imagine they'll let him be...
He's the moral core. He's not a bad guy. He's misguided because of his experience, but this is an animation and somewhat kids movie, so they're going to try to tie it where it's like...
Yeah, I'm sure.
Everybody has to decide their own destiny and nothing's set in stone or some shit, and 2099 has to understand that, and they'll figure out a reason that Earth got destroyed or whatever.
Well, they also set up quite the villain for the next one. Besides,
I am a little disappointed that, like, Scarlet Spider, they kind of made into a joke, and it's like his first time, like, being in a major movie.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really have the origin of Scarlet Spider, but Scarlet Spider was kind of funny. Kind of reminded me of the '90s angst, which he was put into.
I like the new main crew they've set up for the next one, along with
at the end,
dudes from the start. The dudes from the first movie are coming back for the big hero team, and then we got some new guys with Spider-Man India and Spider-Punk.
They did a good job establishing the 2 or 3 new characters they've added to the original gang.
It does kind of feel like,
and I was kind of disappointed not to see Noir, and we see Penny in like a cameo role. We don't see Spider-Ham. And then at the end, it's like, okay, these guys already know what's up with Miles, and they know the multiverse better than Miguel, or they have a different perspective on it. So it's going to be kind of cool seeing the old team come back together and take another ride after the first one.
I do feel like Spider-Man India and Spider-Punk don't get nearly enough to do like the characters in the first one do, but I'm sure that's something that's going to be a non-issue with part 2 as well.
Right.
Because both of those characters are part of the big good Spider team at the end, but
Spider-Punk,
they get introduced in this one.
They get introduced and it establishes why they would be on the team and not riding with Miguel so much. Spider-Punk sees Miguel as kind of an authoritarian, and then Spider-Man India had the anomaly, and, Miles basically risked his life to save his girlfriend's dad and all that, and changed the multiverse a little bit. So you get why the team's coming together, and it's a cool cool moment. Like you said, there's a lot of cool animation. I think they stepped it up. Even stuff where it isn't necessarily the different styles they mesh together looks good. Like I really like that scene where Gwen and Miles are talking and they're like walking around the gargoyle and stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's like specific scenes that look really creative. Not that the first movie wasn't creative, but this movie's like, okay, now we got a bigger budget. We got 4-ish years to make this movie. Let's just flex on what we got. I also really like the director, because the director only did DC animated films before this, but he didn't do a ton of them. And all the ones he did was really good. Like, he directed a bunch of shorts for Superman Shazam. And then he directed some G.I. Joe movie I hadn't seen. But I've actually seen most of his movies. And the DC shorts he did are some of the best and most creative stuff. Like, he did a Jonah Hex one, which was alright. He did the Green Arrow one, that's really good. Mm-hmm. And he did Spectre, which is like my favorite DC animated thing. And it's like, damn, we should get a live action Spectre movie. Or some sort of Spectre movie. Okay. But that's good. Check out, if you liked this, check out DC's showcases Superman Shazam. You could probably like see it on HBO Max or something. It's 5 shorts and he does the 3 good ones on the collection. So, the director hasn't done much, but I actually like what he's done in the past. So, I was like, he's going from direct to DVD to a major blockbuster, but I did have a little faith because I was like, okay, but he's done some of DC Animated's best stuff. So
I read that they were workshopping Spider-Punk's look in this movie for pretty much the entire 3-year development, and they only finalized it a little bit before the movie actually got pressed and finalized, which is
I think it looks great. Like
it looks super cool.
Because you got like this 70s like Sex Pistols punk rock
also like
type character, and they did a really good job of capturing that.
Like 1600s Vulture with the yellowed scroll and sketchy lines, and
I wish it was
cool. Super cool.
I wish it was Spider-Man Noir's Vulture, because that dude's crazy. I only know him from the Shattered Dimensions video game.
Yeah.
But anyways, I might do a video on Shattered Dimensions just because I think it's interesting.
I read the original all the Spider-Man multiverse shit.
Literally just some random Xbox B title was the start of all this crap.
Yeah, it was written by the guy who went on to write Spider-Verse.
It was written by Dan Slott, who I have my beef with Dan Slott because he's not a very good writer. But, you know what? He's done some okay shit. He does, like, okay issues, but most of his, like, grand ideas are pretty stupid, mostly. And the first Spider-Verse event is garbage, because it's about, like, evil vampires that want to eat all the Spider-Men through the multiverse. And then Peter Parker's like, we gotta fucking come together and fight these evil guy.
He sounds stupid, so...
And then Miles was... it was the second time Miles met Spider-Man, and it was like a treat back then. But then they ruined Miles in the comics because they're like, we're going to bring him to 616 because we don't want Ultimate to be a thing anymore. And it's like, well, Miles, the only thing that made Miles special... And originally he was just Peter Parker, but black, because Brian Michael Bendis didn't know how to write him. Like, I'm sorry, but Miles kind of was like it was a gimmick. They killed Peter Parker off in a really cool thing, and then they're like, well, we want more Ultimate Spider-Man, so make a new Ultimate Spider-Man. And then Brian Michael Bendis is like, okay, well, I'll make this new character, but then Brian Michael Bendis was like, I'm just gonna write him to literally be Peter Parker. So honestly, I didn't really like the character. I didn't hate Miles Morales. I just thought he was more Peter Parker. He didn't really get unique until the Spider-Verse movies, though. Anyways, I'm getting on a tangent. Yeah, I kind of want to do one on Shattered Dimensions. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because then it'll be my way to make tangents on these movies and the comics and how they fucked up the Ultimate Universe, which pissed me off. But regardless, this movie was pretty great. So Aiden, this movie was pretty great. So Aiden, would you recommend Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
Yeah. It's the best first half of a movie you could possibly ask for. The fact that it is half a movie, like, you kind of just gotta know that it's not getting finished going in.
Right.
It's still worth seeing in theaters simply because it looks so incredible.
It's also nice that they're not doing it.
Yeah.
It's like 3 years to watch part 2. It's 10 months, which is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I would definitely recommend seeing it just for the artistry alone. Super nice. Really looking forward to the next one. If you're a little on the fence about it, you can probably catch the first part on streaming and watch the second half in theaters, because I'm sure it'll be just as visually spectacular. But even though this doesn't really have its own conclusion or payoff, which it probably should have as the first half of the movie, it's still really good. So yeah, in a weird way, yeah, I recommend it even though it's the half a movie. Connor, would you recommend Across the Spider-Verse?
I'd also recommend it. Kind of like you said, you can kind of do one of two things. If you're one of those people that have a hard time waiting to see a whole story, I would recommend just waiting and then watching this on, just rent this or buy this movie and then watch it, and then watch part 2 next in March when that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, I do recommend the theatrical experience because it's a very beautiful movie, and maybe if Sony realizes that their movies that are actually high quality animated movies make money, they'll bother to do good ones. Plus, even if the next movie's the end of Spider-Verse, which I'd be totally fine with, I also wouldn't mind seeing some spin-offs, like a Spider-Punk movie or a Gwen movie or something.
They're working on... They announced it last year, I think. It's like a female-focused one that's going to be Spider-Gwen, and I assume the pregnant one, and probably some other female Spider-Mans
Well,
doing some shit.
they couldn't hold their boner in because they announced the live-action Miles movie.
Who's doing that? MCU?
Sony. We don't know if it's going to be in association with the MCU yet. It might be its own thing.
Weird.
Maybe it'll be in the Venom verse. They gotta find a Spider-Man for the Venom verse, bro.
I guess. Honestly, if I was at Sony, I'd just be like, yeah, bring Andrew Garfield back. Fucking Venom went across the universe, and now shit's fucked up, and now he's in the Andrew Garfield universe. You know? People loved the Andrew Garfield redemption in fucking Spider-Man 3, the new Spider-Man 3.
Because Andrew Garfield's a decent actor, and he's a good face for Spider-Man and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
he's a good Spider-Man when he's not given a boring-ass, bummy script.
Wasn't it like Alex Kurtzman writing? And then Mark Webb directing, like what do you
Alex Kurtzman and Robert Orci wrote the Amazing Spider-Man movies.
I think they were directed. I don't know who wrote number
Mark
1
Webb.
actually.
Yes, they're the infamous sequel guys: Star Trek Into Darkness, Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Yeah, they do all the really bad sequels.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote the first one, but Alex Webb maybe should have stuck to his fucking twee, quirky, romantic comedies starring Zooey Deschanel instead of...
I do have one more complaint. Like, if I was a kid, like, because kids probably don't keep up on all the Marvel stuff like we do.
Yeah, they don't have...
If I was a kid who like, went to this movie, I would be bored as hell because there's so much exposition. And I would be like, what the hell are all these characters? But then there's really good parts. I don't know if I'd be bored as hell.
I don't think I'd be bored. There's good pacing of the
He's good pacing.
action balance. And
there are some
emotional
exposition
stuff.
dumps. Like pretty much everything with 2099 that wasn't an action scene was a massive exposition dump.
Yeah, but
Like when he said, "Machine, activate the exposition dump." But it was kind of an entertaining
even during the exposition dump, there's a bunch of little cameo Spider-Mans on screen, and then it leads into the biggest action scene of the
Also,
movie.
speaking of,
I mean, I liked New
Miller
Hope
and
as
Lord.
a kid, and New Hope is fucking like 90% fucking exposition.
I'll tell you, New Hope was the one I was spinning the least as a kid, though, because like you'd sit there and be bored. But as an adult, it's my favorite Star Wars.
My favorite too.
But no. Speaking of Lord and Miller, they're also producing that new Clone High. I watched it with Grant Newkirk. It's pretty funny.
I've heard good things about it.
It's actually surprisingly good. Like it looks like it would be cringe, but it's pretty good. I'll probably next time Grant Newkirk comes over.
I've heard
I'll
the show is
probably
good,
catch
and
up.
I've heard that the new season is keeping up the quality that it had back in the day. So.
I watched part of season 1 and I thought
I've seen a
season
couple
1
clips
was
on
okay.
YouTube, and I was like, "Hey,
Season 1 seemed okay. I
Can't
only
believe-
watched like 3 episodes. I kind of liked season 2 better because both are very much like shows of the time period. Like
oh yeah,
Clone High season 1 is commenting on 2003, and there's a similar quality to Clone High 2.
but it's commenting on an era that
2020.
you were alive in.
I was alive in 2003. I was
You were
just five.
sentient for."
And half the jokes are fucking dated. It's like, is global warming real? And it's like, you're a fucking retard.
Wow.
That's half of the 2003 one.
Did they cut Gandhi from the new one?
Yeah, they did. But they actually kind of did it in a funny way, even though that was kind of a pussy move. And Gandhi didn't add much to the show. He was just a horny side character. In the episodes I've seen, Gandhi's like trying to party and bang chicks, which is kind of a funny thing. But I mean, Gandhi in real life was just a horny dude who wanted to fuck children.